Welcome back to Baking School with Jami. I'm so glad you're joining me. In today's lesson, we're going to cover a quick introduction to the different types of flours that you can use and when you would want to use them. Now, don't be tempted to skip this lesson as it's a vital one. When I first started learning how to cook, I thought there were two types of flour, white flour and whole wheat flour. And of course, like almond flour, but that's it. Oh, and something called cake flour. I had used that. Now I really laugh because there are dozens of different types of flour. In fact, wheat flour, there's dozens of those. And just different flours you can bake with, and they can yield very different results. So if you want to become an awesome baker, you need to learn the difference between flours and, most importantly, discover which flour your family loves the most. That's what we've been discovering over the last few years, and I really know a lot of different flours now. Especially if you have allergies or if you have sensitivities to grain or gluten, you really need to learn this lesson. Those who can't have gluten often feel so stuck because they can't bake bread. That's what they think. And yet, there are tons of awesome gluten-free flours that you can start with to learn. In fact, we're going to have a whole gluten-free class later on in course number 1 on quick breads. Okay, if you're ready, let's go ahead and dive in. Now, as a reminder, before we get into it, you can head over to bakingschoolwithjami.com to access all of the printables and recipes for free that go along with each lesson. Every lesson, we are going to come up with a fantastic, simple recipe for you to do right alongside me. So watch until the end of this lesson today because we're going to be learning how to make quick but delicious homemade pancakes that are amazing and can be really healthy. And then don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another episode of Baking School with Jami. All right, category number 1 is different types of flour in the grocery store, white flour. There's a bunch of different kinds. All right, so we're gonna first start with the most common types of flour you're gonna run across at your normal grocery store. You run to Walmart or wherever you shop for groceries, you go to the flour aisle, what's there? Okay. Most of us start here just picking something up at Walmart, and knowing the different types of grocery store flours will greatly help you in the coming lessons, especially as you're getting started out. So this first section contains all the white flours you'll come across, those that have been processed and refined in some way, and there's a lot of them at the grocery store. There's a lot of different options. The first one we're going to talk about is all-purpose flour. This is good old white flour that we are used to. You can find it cheap. You can find it in every single store. And this great flour, which really is all-purpose, can be used from pizza dough to donuts to loaf bread to muffins. And if you're just starting out, all-purpose flour can be really easy to start using. In fact, all of these recipes here we have in quick breads, you are going to be able to use all-purpose flour. So all-purpose flour is created by taking the whole form of wheat, called wheat berries, and then they're milled, they're ground into flour. And during that milling process, the germ and the bran are removed. We all remember from biology class that the germ and the bran contain almost all of the nutrients in the flour. But once milled, they're not shelf stable. As they contain a lot of those healthy oils, they start to go rancid almost immediately. So it doesn't just sit on the shelf for 6 to 9 months very easily before you buy it and take it home, and then it sits in your pantry another 6 months. So to make up for this loss of nutrients, many white flours are enriched. So it means they've taken out the natural nutrients in it, and then they've added back in vitamins and nutrients. You'll see on the white flour enriched with whatever. Now I have to wonder how many of those nutrients added back in are synthetic versions of those vitamins and nutrients that, it's always better to get it from the source. But the next thing you need to know when picking a white flour is if it's bleached or unbleached. So after milling and removing the bran and the germ, most white flour out there is bleached. It goes through a bleaching process. This makes it stark white as well as a softer flour. So when I buy all-purpose flour, I always buy unbleached flour. I don't need bleach in my food that I'm serving to my family. So my favorite is organic unbleached flour from azurestandard.com. It's still very affordable when I buy it in 25-pound bags, and it's the healthier version for when I want to make some white flour treats, when we're making cinnamon rolls on Christmas morning. I love having a good all-purpose flour to use in that case. All right, and like I said, all-purpose flour will work great for all of the recipes here in course 1 on quick bread. So if you want to just go to the store, grab a thing of white flour to get started baking, go for it. The second one we're going to cover is self-rising flour. You might have this or you might have seen it on the shelf. So what is it? Well, this is all-purpose flour that has baking soda and salt added back into it during the milling process. So this allows for quick breads to rise quickly and easily, and because it's already got it in there. Now, I never ever buy this because I don't see the point. So if you are using recipes that call for self-rising flour, great, but it doesn't help me. So with all the recipes I share here in course 1, quick breads, we're going to be adding our own baking powder or baking soda or salt when it's called for. So if you do come across a recipe that you want to try that calls for self-rising flour, you can easily make your own by mixing together 1 cup of all-purpose flour with 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder and half a teaspoon of salt. This will be in the notes if you go to bakingschoolwithjami.com. So if you do come across a recipe, you can do that, but I don't think it makes any sense to stock self-rising flour and all-purpose flour. Let's simplify it, okay? All right, flour number 3 is bread flour. This is what people always ask me, do you buy bread flour? I don't. So do you need to buy a separate bread flour to bake with? All right, I like to keep my kitchen pretty simple without having to stock a ton of different ingredients that have more limited uses. So I don't ever buy bread flour. If I want a white flour, I use all-purpose and it works great. It just sometimes you're adding in, more things to the recipe. So all-purpose flour is most often made by combining a hard wheat berry. A hard wheat berry has a higher protein percentage and it works well for stiff yeast breads. They combine that with a soft wheat berry, which is softer and works better for muffins or pastries at about an 80-20 ratio. So it's kind of actually a combination of different flours. Now, bread flour uses flour milled, so that was for all-purpose. Bread flour uses flour milled from 100% hard wheat berries, so you're getting a higher protein content, about 12 to 15% for making yeast breads. So if you use all-purpose flour and you find your yeast breads are falling or they're too soft, then you could try using bread flour. That could help, that could work. We're also gonna get more into this in course number 3 when we dive into yeast breads. That's not something you really need to worry about yet with quick breads. We will get into that. The 4th category is cake flour. Okay, so this is the one I had used many years ago. When we first got married, before kids, I started taking cake decorating classes and I loved it. I threw myself into learning how to make the most delicious from scratch cakes, which definitely takes some practice. And what I learned was that you had to use cake flour for the best results. Although I still think you can make a really mean cake with all-purpose flour. But at the time, I had no clue what cake flour was. Like it was just another product on the grocery store shelf. I didn't understand all the different flours and how they worked. So cake flour is a low protein flour made from milling soft wheat berries. It makes sense. It's a softer flour. Its protein content is only around 6 to 8% as opposed to bread flour, which is 12 to 15. And so it yields a much softer flour and end product. Cake flour is bleached and milled at a finer degree than all-purpose, so it's very soft and like velvety to the touch. Now, I don't buy cake flour anymore because I will just mill my own soft wheat myself, but cake flour can be used at certain times, and it might be one that you want to keep on stock if you do a lot of cake baking. Pastry flour is another one you'll see. It's very closely related to cake flour. In fact, I use those two interchangeably. It has a slightly higher protein content of 7 to 9%, but it's used for pastries and all of that. And this is another flour that I don't mess with storing. I just use all-purpose or my own freshly milled flour. All right, next up is different types of flour in the grocery store, the whole wheat flours. So when you walk into your grocery store, you're gonna find the section of all those white flours we talked about, but you're also gonna find some whole wheat varieties. So at the end, I will share with you what I use. All right, so whole wheat flour is made by milling the entire wheat berry and leaving the flour whole with all of the nutrients intact. More or less. There are a lot of whole wheat flours where they're taking out the unshelf-stable components and putting synthetic ones back in. That's a whole another discussion. But most whole wheat flour you find in the store is very dense and your whole wheat creations come out tasting a lot like cardboard. This is what I tried to do for years. So why is that? Because when you grind your own grains fresh, they taste and look nothing like that. Okay, so first, the type of berry used to make the whole wheat flour makes a big difference. This is gonna be helpful, you guys. So isn't whole wheat just whole wheat? No, there are a ton of different wheat varieties. Hard red, hard white, soft white being the most common modern varieties that you're gonna find. So hard red is the most common whole wheat flour on the shelf. Hard red also happens to have a very strong whole wheat taste, and it makes much more dense bread products. So we go grab a bag of that, not realizing that it's kind of a denser product to begin with. Some people don't love the taste. We don't. I don't like hard red. And I don't ever use hard red berries in my own kitchen because it's just too dense and kind of more that what we associate with like a whole wheat taste, but not necessarily in a pleasant way. Some people love hard red. Now, the hard white variety is still a whole grain, still contains all those nutrients, but produces a much lighter, softer taste. So King Arthur brand sells a whole wheat, it's a white whole wheat flour that you can find at most grocery stores. It is not a combination of whole wheat and white flour. It is simply whole wheat from a different type of wheat berry. So if you want to try some whole wheat creations yourself with just a store-bought flour, try King Arthur's white whole wheat. It will make a world of difference, okay? The second reason that store-bought whole wheat flour just often doesn't taste that good is that whole wheat flour has gone rancid by the time it's sat on the grocery store shelves for 6 to 9 months or longer. It creates a much heavier end product than if those berries were milled freshly and then you baked your bread with it right away. So as soon as wheat berries are ground, its shelf life drastically goes down. You can easily store whole wheat berries in an airtight bucket for 25, 30 years, grind them, they're gonna be just fine. But as soon as you grind the wheat, you've opened up all the oils locked inside the bran and the germ, which then also unlocks the nutrition. But once these oils are exposed to oxygen, they start to oxidize and slowly start to go rancid, or quickly go rancid. In fact, some studies have shown that within just 72 hours of milling grain, whole wheat flour has lost up to 90% of its nutrients. And that flour that oil in it kind of just starts to go rancid and gets really heavy and starts to get kind of an off flavor. So when that flour just sits in a bag on the grocery store shelf, the oils in it are going rancid. And as a result, you lose this really fresh, nutty taste that freshly ground whole wheat has, and you get a really heavy, non-fluffy flour, and this translates to your final product. I do think the King Arthur white whole wheat does a much better job of this, but it is still going to be present you're just always gonna get something a bit more dense with a store-bought whole wheat. So what's the solution then? When you take flour and bake it, it locks in all those nutrients. It stops the oxidization process and you'll get all those good nutrients in your food. So what I do in my own kitchen is that I take the whole berry, I grind it fresh, and I use it immediately and bake right away. Anything I don't use right away gets put in a bag and stored in the fridge. We will do a whole course on freshly ground grains. Don't feel like you need to jump into that now. Don't feel overwhelmed. But you would not believe the taste difference. Freshly milled flour is light and fluffy. It makes the most incredible breads, from pizza dough to sandwich bread to muffins, banana bread, waffles, and so much more. But this is a topic we will get into further. If you just go to the store and buy a bag of white flour and you start learning how to cook, that is awesome. Great job. Celebrate that. There's always future baby steps you can take if you want to. Okay, so this is where the real diversity in flours comes into play when you start grinding your own grains. So I'm going to briefly cover this real fast because I think it really helps to know the different types of grains, because you could order, for example, spelt flour if you wanted to, if you don't have your own mill. Okay, so the first one we've already talked briefly about: hard white and hard red wheat berries. These are both very common. I started out using hard white for about a year before I moved on to ancient grains. And hard white is a very easy grain to start with and produces a very light tasting, easy flour to use for tons of different things. Hard white and hard red are both considered modern wheat varieties, which are hybrids of older varieties. And hard varieties are used best for yeast breads, for sourdough, anything that you're wanting like that stiffer dough. Your hard varieties are gonna work really, really well. That's what we get for bread flour. Now, soft wheat berries. Soft white wheat has a much lower protein content and works very well as a cake or pastry flour. So you can use it for super soft muffins, other desserts and pastries. I don't really use soft wheat much anymore. I use spelt, which is kind of a combination of the hard and the soft, and I just use it for everything. Okay, einkorn. Einkorn has been growing rapidly in popularity and for very good reason. Einkorn is an ancient grain. In fact, it's the world's oldest form of wheat, and it's likely what Cain and Abel were growing. It is a form of wheat, and thus it does contain gluten, but it's a very different gluten structure from modern wheat. So a lot of people who cannot handle modern wheat do absolutely amazing on einkorn. There's even been studies for celiacs. So it's something to look into. Einkorn is a more simple grain with only 14 chromosomes compared to modern wheat, which has 42 chromosomes. And it does not contain the D chromosome, which has what has been linked with wheat intolerance. So many people who normally cannot handle gluten do absolutely wonderful on einkorn. It's so worth trying because you can make yeast breads, you can make sourdough, everything, and it's awesome. Now, I consider ancient grains like einkorn and spelt a superfood. They're packed with so many nutrients that we're lacking in our modern world. And according to einkorn.com, einkorn contains high amounts of protein, phosphorus, vitamin B6, and potassium, especially compared to modern wheat. And it also contains carotenoids, probably saying that wrong, which help in preventing cancer. You can buy the whole berry, grind it yourself. You can also buy the whole grain version of einkorn or the white flour equivalent to einkorn. And just experiment. So you can get it at azurestandard.com, einkorn.com, jovialfoods.com. I'll have links for you if you want to go check those out. All right, the next one is spelt. Spelt is my personal favorite grain. This is what I use for a good 95% of all of my baking across the board. Like einkorn, spelt is an ancient grain, but it's easily 2 to 5 times less expensive than einkorn. I get organic spelt from Azure Standard for about $35 for a 25-pound bag, which is cheaper than many modern kinds of wheat you can find. I get that cheaper than I can find hard white. And I do the vast majority of my cooking with it. So I always have a good 75 to 100 pounds on stock at all times. And in most of my recipes, you'll see that I do use spelt, but you can easily substitute store-bought wheat, hard white, einkorn, kamut, kind of whatever you like to use. You'll start to get the knack of how you can kind of use it in different recipes. So spelt is a terrific source of B vitamins. Anybody lacking energy? As well as a terrific source of copper, phosphorus, manganese, magnesium, protein, and fiber. And I like spelt because it works as a fantastic replacement for both hard and soft wheat varieties, as it kind of falls in the middle and has a more mild taste than einkorn. Einkorn does have a bit of a stronger taste, more like a hard red. It's just a little bit more of a taste. We really like it, but spelt is just that much softer. So you can get it at Azure Standard, ancientgrains.com, pleasanthillgrain.com. I always get all of mine from Azure Standard. All right, and then there's some other honorable mentions that we can get into in the future courses, but things like kamut or kamut, however you say it, it's another good ancient grain and good for pasta. There's amaranth, there's millet, there's rye, there's barley, there's oats, there's buckwheat, just to name a few. And those are all really good for different things. And it's really fun to start experimenting with different kinds. And because I have a grain mill, it makes it easy that I can have some different grains on stock because they last forever and grind it as I need. But as you're getting started, don't get bogged down with any of that. I just wanted to give you an overview of those. Okay, gluten-free flours. In lesson number 9, we're gonna cover those in depth and how to use them. Many gluten-free flours like almond flour or coconut flour, you really need specific recipes for those. It's not as easy to try and use regular recipes and change them into those. But for our purposes for this quick breads course, I wanna mention one terrific option. All right, it is called Bob's Red Mill, that's the brand, gluten-free 1-to-1 baking flour. I will have links for you. Go to bakingschoolwithjami.com. This baking flour works as a cup-for-cup substitute for quick breads. So get my simple blueberry muffin recipe and you can use that cup for cup. You don't even have to do anything. And if you're gluten-free, grab a bag of this and follow along all the recipes we're making through this course. This flour won't work well for yeast breads, but we will cover gluten-free yeast breads when we get to it. I'll give you some recommendations for flour for that. But you can find the 1-to-1 flour on Amazon, or you can even get a 25-pound bag of it from Azure Standard for just $58. Now that's more expensive than something like spelt, but at the same time, that is such a good price. If you are, it'll make you so many gluten-free things, especially if you're buying anything gluten-free from the store. Start making your own and it's just, you will save so much money. All right, now stick around for a few more minutes while we make healthy and easy pancakes together, and then head over to bakingschoolwithjami.com to download the printable sheet from today's lesson with all of the flours we talked about today, and to download the recipe for today's lesson for free. And then don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you never miss a future episode of Baking School with Jami. Okay, let's get over to the recipe. Okay, today we're making the most amazing homemade pancakes. You're gonna see actually how quick and easy these are to make from scratch pancakes. You can use any flour you want. We just did white all-purpose flour to make these like a fun special treat, but I make these with spelt all the time. You can use kind of whatever flour that you want. And you're gonna see how easy it is. You don't need boxed pancake. You can make these from scratch. We're gonna put our eggs in, and I'm making a nice big batch here to have a lot and leftovers for our family. We got some milk. We've got vanilla extract, and we're just gonna beat that liquid together, transferred it to a bigger bowl. I realized I needed it because it was splashing everywhere. So we're gonna get it all frothed up. I think that was butter I added in, and then here's our flour. We're gonna add in some salt and baking powder and just kind of get that mixed together. You can see a little baby foot as I'm getting this all ready. We're going to mix that together really quickly. We got a toddler getting a snack. And then we're just gonna combine the dry ingredients with the wet ingredients. That's what makes this a quick bread, even though, you know, it's pancakes, but that's it. We mix it together and our batter is ready to go. At this point, you could add blueberries or chocolate chips if you wanted to. I'm using these griddle pans that I have that are so handy to do a bunch of big ones all at once. So you can see we're making them right here. And then you just cook your pancakes like normal. I just make sure to really put a lot of good oil down. You're gonna get them flipped and you have the most amazing homemade pancakes.